Give me the red light. He gave me the red light. Let's see. And, yep, YouTube recognizes us. Hopefully, we are going to go live in a minute. Yeah, it's loading. And yes, we are back online. I have no idea what happened there. I have a feeling that was Restream's problem, not mine. I thought it was the stream key that was wrong. But hey, everyone who's tuning in now, if there are people tuning in at all, you just missed the continuation of the saga of technical problems leading up to the stream. And you also missed us explain the saga of the creation of the stream. Let me just refresh my stuff so that I'm like caught up. Yeah, so I have to manually look at each chat because Restream's like not connected properly. But that's okay. All right, so basically, to catch everyone up, we are live now by a series of technical miracles that cannot be explained, but we are now live. But basically, we've decided that we would sort of nix the reviewing Reddit this week just because both of the people we're going to review couldn't make it and or kind of scurried away, I guess is the best way to put it. Which is fair. Like, I gave the person short notice, and Ben's person, they didn't expect to be kind of put on blast, so that's fine. I think this is a lesson for us that we should probably let people know farther in advance that this is going to be happening so that we're not caught by surprise last minute. But if you are around, thank you for being here. So the two topics that we will be discussing, oh, and by the way, Nathan's not here, which is the extra thing as well. So it's just us two for today. And so instead what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about two topics. I'm going to be talking about Scarlett Johansson suing Disney, or suing Marvel, or actually I'll be explaining all the entities involved in whatever later. And also I'll undoubtedly have a Disney tirade in me somewhere as well. Ben, you want to explain what you'll be talking about?
Yeah, so kind of last minute, I thought of something that's been kind of on my mind recently, which is diegetic music in the Star Wars. So it may not be the most well-developed segment that I've done, but something I can just talk a little bit about. So
the show must go on. Yeah. And last thing I'll say before we begin is, as you can see, I have a cap on right here. Gotta do a shout out. This is my weekly update. Is I finally have merch for Ariella. So this beautiful cap right here. This is a beautiful crew cap. If you're on set and you want to you want to look fresh but subtle. You can get this beautifully insigniaed Ariella cap. It's got here. Let me just show you. On the back there, it's got the Ariella logo, and you can rep my company, which you probably know nothing about, but I like the hat. We've got shirts as yeah. See, hey, and we've also got t-shirts and whatever. It'll be on the Ariella store, ariella.co, whatever. And that's pretty much all I've got. So Ben, you can take it away.
Okay, so yeah, a little bit of discussion of diegetic music in Star Wars and effectiveness and silly creative decisions that are not the composer's fault. So I know we've discussed it before, but just for any audience members who are not familiar with what diegetic music is, diegetic music is music that is in the world of the media which you're watching. So in the world of a video game or in the world of the film, not just something that the audience is hearing, but the people in the film or video game, whatever, are actually hearing. It's part of their world. And Star Wars has a pretty nice tradition of diegetic music. I'd ask anyone who's in the audience what their favorite piece of diegetic music in Star Wars is, but that's not really a competition, because I'm sure that 100% of people, if I asked them, would say the Cantina Band, in the first movie, and that's really that's the classic. Although there's some other really cool things. So yeah, that's obviously the first example that's going to come to everyone's mind, and that, like I said, kind of starts the great tradition of diegetic music in Star Wars. So the reason I actually was thinking about this topic was I was asking myself after our last show, thinking about like future topics to do, and I was thinking about, if I've talked a lot about not like directly about the score for Solo, but we've talked kind of tangentially about it and how I think it's probably the best score of the last decade. And thinking about, if I were to talk about Solo, what would I start with? And the first thing that came to my mind was talking about the diegetic music, which is a really, really silly choice, probably. But I think that's would be a good way to look at it. Like, what is so different about it than a lot of other Star Wars, even Star Wars scores, recent Star Wars scores, and why? Like, what is the diegetic music doing? And so I kind of went from there, and not into so much into Solo, but thinking about diegetic music in general in Star Wars. So why? What makes diegetic music in Star Wars effective? Like, what is so great about the diegetic music in Solo, for example? And so in Solo, there are three kind of examples of diegetic music, and the first one we can kind of write off, which is Han sees the recruitment poster for joining the Imperial, I guess, Air Force, or I guess it'd be Navy. I guess they call it Navy. So becoming a fighter pilot, and the recruitment poster has Darth Vader's theme in a major key, which is a really stupid decision, if you ask me. Not like musically a stupid decision, but stupid decision on whoever, the director who decided they wanted that to be included, because how can you take like a really iconic theme, maybe the most iconic theme in all of film music, and then just kind of pretend that it's actually like the sound of the Empire's recruitment? Like, it's a ridiculous self-commentary. Like, okay,
Yeah,
so
it's like fourth wall breaking in a bad way, I guess.
yeah, it just doesn't feel right for Star Wars. Like, if that had been the like diegetic sound of the Empire, from the beginning, not just like the theme for Darth Vader, that would make more sense. So we'll write that off, because that's not a composer decision. That's a higher level decision that was really silly. But the other two pieces of diegetic music we get in it, which I just find so fascinating, it's called Chicken in the Pot and Stormtrooper JP 054 Karaoke. And they're both sung by I don't know the names of these characters. They have official names, but this kind of singing duo that sings on Crimson Dawn's like party boat. Yeah, so that's part. It's in that tradition of of Star Wars diegetic music, mainly being in like lounges, bars, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are other uses of diegetic music in Star Wars. I guess the other general things you're gonna find diegetic music in Star Wars, things that like you get mass choral singing that is supposed to be like the singing of the people in victory moments. So the end of episode 1 and the end of episode 6. Mm-hmm. I find both of those a little bit annoying, but I think that's part of it's kind of an intentional effect by Williams. the Ewoks singing and the little kids singing. And I guess there's just some other general like world building, soundscape building diegetic music, though a lot of it is like was recorded and then cut from the film, various films. So that's not terribly important. But most of his stuff kind of follows in the general, pattern laid out by the original Cantina band. And what makes stuff effective, diegetic music, like one of the great things about the Cantina band is that initially, Star Wars, I mean, it's all not practical effects, but they're not using CGI in the 70s. And for that reason, like the world really feels more like gritty and concrete because, people are literally walking around in their alien costumes. You have the modal notes. It's the name of the band that plays in Cantina.
I had no idea they had a name.
Oh yeah, everything has a name in Star Wars. I just don't necessarily remember every name. Like I should probably remember the name of the two singers in Solo, but they don't ever appear again.
Were they named by the production, or is that like a fan thing? Modal notes.
Oh no, they have official names. I mean, if you want to know them, because they don't say them in the film or anything, but if they're given a little backstory, like a 1-paragraph backstory, and like whatever, they put it up on the official Star Wars page. You can look it up. Yeah, but so the modal notes, the group of aliens, kind of orangish aliens with their kind of bulb heads, light bulb heads, in the Cantina. I mean, they feel very like concrete, and they're playing like, they have these wacky instruments that belong obviously in this other galaxy. And I mean, yes, if you look at the orchestration of the actual piece, they're played by a bunch of saxophones and steel drums and trumpets, but it's orchestrated in such a way that like it sounds like it could be coming from these guys. That's what's so cool about it. Like, it's a cool, catchy tune. It works with the scene, and it doesn't seem outrageous to imagine that like that's whatever these instruments in this galaxy would sound like.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's necessarily like the thought that goes through everyone's head when they like see that, but to me, I mean, that's really important. I can imagine those sounds being produced, and the sounds like capture this kind of gritty vibe, and like,
yeah,
it's kind of cool. Like they're playing, they got this jam going, and then someone gets shot and killed in the middle of it, and they just stop. They look at each other and they go back to playing, right? Like, it tells you something about.
It's a CD bar.
Exactly. It tells you where they are and what the crowd is like. So, obviously that's really effective. So, before I get back to Solo and those two bits of diegetic music, what I want to talk about some examples of things that are less effective, and there are plenty of examples of really ineffective diegetic music in Star Wars, and some of these are Williams' fault, some of them are not. So like, for instance, you could look at the not Max Rebo, sorry. I'll think Max Rebo is the kind of blue elephant guy, but in episode 2, so he's in episode 6, but in episode 2, Dexter, his name is Dexter. Obi-Wan goes to Dexter's diner to meet with this alien who tells him about the Kaminoans, the cloners, making the clone army. And the actual diegetic music is way long. The scene is like 12. The scene of music is like 12 to 20 seconds long. It's like a 2-minute long thing, which you should never subject yourself to listening to all of it if you listen to the original soundtrack. But so there's some diegetic music in Dexter's diner. I mean, I guess for the fact that it's 12 seconds long in the film, it's fine. Like I said, I would never listen to it beyond 12 to 20 seconds. This kind of really silly, like techno music. And maybe that's the root of like ineffective diegetic music. There's just not really a coherent sense of like what musical style should exist in a galaxy and when. It tends to be this weird techno stuff. It sounds like it's from the 80s and or a cheap imitation of 80s music. So that's an example of like it's probably fine for the 12 to 20 seconds that it's in there, but beyond that it's unlistenable. Two other things. So I mentioned Max Rebo. So if you watch episode 6, there's some fun stuff. So in Jabba's palace, Max Rebo, the kind of blue elephant guy, he has his own band, the Max Rebo Band, and they perform. Well, we have a Twi'lek dancing rather suggestively for Jabba, and in the original film, they do a song called Lopti Neck, which is written by John Williams, and it's actually not bad. It's not like the greatest thing, but it sounds like it's in the right world. It doesn't sound like it doesn't sound ridiculous. It sounds like something you can imagine is coming from Max Rebo's instruments, and it sounds like something you can imagine a crime lord who's basically having like a sort of like a strip dancer dancing for him, and a bunch of live musicians performing would could conceivably be listening to.
Right.
It doesn't I mean like a PG strip dancing, like but that's clearly like the suggestion that we're being given. So I think it's effective. Lopti Neck. So they wrote the lyrics first, and then they translated them into Huttese, the language of the Hutts, like Jabba. I think the actual lyrics in English are like Lopti Neck. I think it means work it out. I don't know. So that's totally fine if you ask me. And that was written by Williams, but in the 1998 special edition, when they redid that scene amongst a whole bunch of other scenes and added a whole bunch of CGI, Lucas decided that was not going to cut it. So he hired I'm trying to think. I'll think of a guy's first name. It's something Hay. Jerry Hay, I want to say, is the name of the composer. Jerry Hay, to write something called Jedi Rocks. So we've got like we're going from the original kind of like real costumes and people in real costumes to a whole bunch of CGI. He puts in a CGI like this kind of weird alien who has a name, and I'll probably should remember it, singing for Jabba, who's apparently like Jabba's mistress, but most she's kind of like this tiny little like blue blob with a long like lips that like extend out, like it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So he decided that he needed new music for this, and that Lopti Neck wouldn't work. So he commissions Jerry Hay to write Jedi Rocks, which is just, it is so bad. I mean, the scene itself is not good because of the CGI, and we could, you could go into like silly creative decisions Lucas made with the special editions. But to change the music too, I mean, Jedi Rocks. I'm not gonna criticize Jerry Hay for his writing, but it's like the worst possible imitation of really, really bad 80s like techno disco, something like not even, it has its own identity crisis, and it just has it makes it seem ridiculous on top of it already looking ridiculous with the CGI.
Right.
So that's like to me that's like the epitome of failure. That's totally George Lucas, like, I need a totally new musical direction here in addition to my like artistic visual direction on this scene.
George Lucas was not a good director at all.
Yeah,
Famously bad director. I mean, like no one liked working with him, which is not very good. In terms of cohesion amongst your team.
mhm.
He was famously obsessive with details that didn't end up getting really into the film anyway. Ended up, a lot of details that would get cut out eventually. And then he got really obsessed with like the tech and the logistics, which is like not really the things you're supposed to be focusing on if you're trying to direct a film, which is why he was such a brilliant producer. I think all those like skills really translate a lot better as a producer than a director.
Mhm.
And I think it shows in what films he did or did not direct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna. That's on Lucas. So we have like his music. It doesn't seem like it should be there like stylistically. It doesn't seem like it could be something that's coming from Max Rebo's instruments, and it just feels so insincere. Like it feels like it's trying too hard to like be like vaguely like galactic, but in a bad like, yeah, I sound like I've been listening to like all the worst 80s music and
Mm.
not really understanding the style anyway kind of way. So like does it accompany the like, Twi'lek uh dancing for Jabba really well? No, it just it makes the whole thing just really really ridiculous. So I guess it comes down to that, like sincerity. You got to take your diegetic music seriously. It has to feel like it like belongs in the world that it and the role in the world that it's supposed to play. And also, it has to sound like it could realistically be like being produced. So to get kind of quickly into to Solo, the two tracks. I mean, so when I say take it seriously, like I don't mean that like the composer can't have like fun with what he's doing, but he has to take like the role the music is playing seriously. So like, "Chicken in the Pot" uh, is according to John Powell. He came up with the title and the lyrics because he saw the concept art for the scene, and it looked like we had this female singer, and then this kind of this disembodied like almost like a disembodied head in floating in water, who's the male singer. And he thought that this guy looked like a chicken in a like pot being boiled. So he wrote the lyrics and the lyrics like literally in English were like talking about the female singer talking about how she wants to eat this chicken in the pot. And he's basically like, "No, I don't want you to eat me." And of course translated into, I think, Huttese as well.
Is it supposed to
Um,
be like a folk tale sort of song? Was that what they were going for? I'm not familiar with it, so I don't remember it, at
no,
least.
I don't. Well, again, 'cause the lyrics themselves like aren't important because it's in Huttese, so we don't know what they're singing unless the only people who know what Huttese are is whoever like does the official creates Huttese
Right.
for Star Wars. So I mean, he's not taking like he's having fun with what he's doing, but the music itself is very serious. Like it sounds absolutely perfect for like people performing in this kind of upscale gathering of like organized crime leaders and their girlfriends. It works really well. Um, so he's taking like the role of the music seriously, even if he's not taking like because the lyrics don't matter, right? So the lyrics are, he's having fun with it. The music just it is so well written and with such like attention to kind of making this. It's kind of like a um where you kind of like this Latin sound. Like you kind of feel like you're walking to like a kind of like bar where you're gonna go drink like tequila and sangrias and stuff. Like it's kind of like it's a really interesting feel, and it's very authentic to like the real world, while still also like having enough, you know, effects that make it sound you know, go in a different kind of space world as well. So yeah, Chicken in the Pot, and then their second act, Stormtrooper JP054 Karaoke. Slightly different like flavors of Latin, but it's so well done. And like if you listen to it and you pay attention to those tracks, they really put you in the world. Like you it makes this criminal gathering more believable. You know, like you can really imagine like that's what these people would be listening to. It, you know, that it's this is the kind of sound that those people are listening to and enjoy, because they're the kind of singers they would hire to come into their gathering. And you know, it's good music to listen to. Like your ears aren't gonna bleed when you listen to it. So that's diegetic music done right. I would say. You know, there, like I said, there are other uses of it in Star Wars. Like you could look at the like Ewoks singing at the end of Episode 6, which you could, you know, like or dislike. I think it kind of hinges on how you feel about the Ewoks themselves, or like the children singing at the end of Episode 1 when Naboo has been liberated from the Trade Federation blockade and siege, and which is interesting too, because they actually sing Darth Sidious's theme in a major key and really slow, which is kind of cool, because we have Palpatine standing right there, you know, watching the like choir of kids in the street sing. So you know, they're letting you know that this is Palpatine, but not in a threatening way yet. So that's kind of cool. You know, you could find that annoying as well. That's your preference. It is kind of supposed to sound like he wants, you know, kind of off key singing from these kids. So intentional or not, that's another use of it. But I think that, you know, the best Star Wars diegetic music is kind of this, you know, stuff in these seedier bars and gatherings, and when it's done really well, like I said, it's sincere. You know, it's trying to take its place. You know, it's in that galaxy. It's in the kind of situation in the galaxy too that the people would find themselves in. So it's believable in that way. It's believable in that it would come from the instruments that are presented. Like if you have a string instrument, it shouldn't be making like a trumpet sound kind of thing. And still sounds like just vaguely, you know, just enough like beyond our galaxy kind of thing. So those I think are the best tracks, and that's why the Cantina Band is so memorable to so many people. Why it's one of the most memorable tracks of all Star Wars.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you're gonna write diegetic music, I think you want to follow that model. It should work in whatever world you're creating. It should be sincere. It shouldn't just be like I'm gonna put 2 seconds of effort into this and call it a day.
Right. Are there any other franchises, movies, or whatever that do diegetic music well, you think, off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, Harry Potter, at least the earlier films, has some cool stuff, but not nearly as much. There's a really wacky track. I can't even remember if I haven't seen the film in so long, but the very first Harry Potter film, I can't remember if it's in the film or not. It's definitely on the soundtrack. It's like these like weird 3 like male voices singing this kind of like ghoulish manner. They're singing like "Merry Christmas, ring the Hogwarts bell, Merry Christmas, cast a Christmas spell," and it's just so weird. I again, I don't remember if it's in the film or not, but it's it and generally like all the diegetic music that's in those first 3 films, it shows you like there's something like kind of like these wizards, these like 11-year-old kids who are like wizards. I mean, like it's kind of cool and like it's wild fantasy, but like they're also kind of kooky, like off people too, to be a wizard and like, oh, I'm playing with toads and cutting up snakes and putting them in potions and stuff. Like, so
yeah.
Of course, that's Williams as well.
I was gonna say that's Williams again. So basically, if you want to be good, just do what John Williams does. Cool. Is that it for that segment?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that was good. That was very interesting. Especially offer like a last minute, sort of thing. I think that was pretty good. Steph says, I can't get over the lyrics and idea behind chicken in the pot. Yes, it is. It is quite absurd.
It is. It's what, like I said, that's the cool juxtaposition. Like you can have fun while you're creating it, but also like take its role in the film seriously, and that's why it's so good. Like, and if I were to, start a segment on Solo, I would start with the diegetic music, because if a diegetic music is crafted with that much care while also having a good time, like the whole film score is going to be great, which it is.
Yeah, for sure. Nathan is in the chat right now. He says, yo, what's up? We miss you on the podcast. Yeah. So I guess we'll start the next segment. Cool. So if you are new to the stream or whatever, this is basically the behind the scenes look at our edited podcast. So what we're going to do is we're going to reintroduce the podcast as if we weren't here before, because we put these out in separate segments. So I guess I'll just jump into that. Welcome back to Mixed Media. It's not like we've been gone for too long. If you missed the first episode, we had an interesting time getting up live. But if you appreciate the efforts, hit the like button, whether you're watching live or in post or whatever. We'd appreciate it. And Ben last time talked about diegetic music in Star Wars, some interesting music like chicken in the pot. And if you want to know what that means, you got to go check out that episode for sure. So this episode here, let me switch up everything real quick. But this episode, I'm going to be talking about some drama that's been cropping up with Black Widow. I talked about Black Widow in episode 18. And in episode 18, I talked about how Disney did not make money off of Black Widow. Or what? I mean, they probably recouped their investment. But that's watch that episode so you can get the full breakdown on how that works. Let's just say their profits were shockingly bad. Interestingly enough, with the shorts that we put out about Black Widow on our channel, we had a couple people say, well, I think we had a comment from someone saying, well, I didn't really care about this character, and I think more people didn't really care about this character than people thought, plus all the characters died, which is basically what I said, the last part about all the characters died. And if you add on top of that people not caring about Black Widow as much as you might want to believe, then I guess that makes sense. Let me wipe the whiteboard here. Not sure why I can't. The layer is locked. That would do it. There we go. We're talking about ScarJo. Now, if you want access to this whiteboard, actually, you can draw on this whiteboard. It's a live whiteboard. It's on a site that you can get the link to. So if you're in the chat right now, if you're one of our subscribers, you can just drop a link in the chat. It's only for live people right now. People who show up live, you can doodle on the whiteboard as we're talking, whatever, as long as you keep it appropriate, of course, or then I'm going to have to kick you off the whiteboard. So ScarJo versus Disney. Let's call it that. So everyone knows Scarlett Johansson is Black Widow, right? Or Natasha. What's her last name? I'm not a Marvel fan. I'll say that up front. So I'm not going to know Marvel lore very well. So
yeah, she's a Romanoff.
Gotcha. Yeah, Natasha
Even though I've
Romanoff.
not seen the film, but I do know.
Yeah, yeah. So she plays, Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. The backstory behind the creation of this film is Black Widow's been in the series for basically ever. She's one of the part of the basically original characters of the Avengers, but she never got her own film, and she never got really a major role. To which fans of Black Widow got really mad about. I think the fans of Black Widow are separate, or I should say, I think the fans of Scarlett Johansson present themselves as fans of Black Widow, but I don't think they quite are. I think they like Scarlett Johansson more than they like Black Widow necessarily. So there's this kind of like cult of personality around her, and so they get very passionate. Like many fandoms, they get very passionate about protecting the person that they like, which is Scarlett Johansson. And so they complained and they said, Disney, why don't you give us a movie? Disney, why don't you give us a movie? And lo and behold, spoiler alert, they go ahead and kill her character. She falls off of something, a cliff, I think, and dies. I think Thanos kills her. Again, I'm not a Marvel fan, so I'm sure I'm sounding like an idiot right now. And then afterwards, they announced that she's going to get her own movie post her death, which leaves people kind of salty, which you can imagine why, after the series lasting for this long, why that would be. Last episode, I mentioned that Black Widow made $60 million opening week on Disney Plus, $80 million in the opening week, but $200 million, or I think $200 million in the first week overall. So in the first week, it made $340 million, something like that. I'm probably butchering that somewhat. Where the total movie budget was probably, including marketing, approximately $400 million. So yeah, have they recouped their money by now? I haven't checked the numbers, but I'm sure they have. The problem though is that they're not going to make as much money as they want to be making, which hopefully is like something like 600 million, 700 million, 1 billion. These are the numbers you want to be seeing for Marvel movies, for tying up your money for so long. I also mentioned in that episode that an increasing cost in Marvel movies are the actors. And that's because you can't get rid of them, And so when you keep signing them onto new contracts, you keep paying them more and more because you don't want them to leave, or else your entire domino, or your house of cards, I should say, of the future of Marvel that's already in production or pre-production, for a movie that's going to come out 5 years from now, is going to fall apart, and you're going to waste a lot of time and money and effort. So, Ben, you want to guess how much Scarlett Johansson has made off of Black Widow thus far? Roughly speaking?
I don't know, 50 million? Probably more than that.
It's actually less than that.
No, less than that.
Yeah, so she's made $20 million thus far, which I'm not actually sure what the historical average is for other Marvel actors, but I'm certain that a lot of the original members, even the ones who died especially the ones who died, I should say, of the original Avengers movies, got paid a lot more than $20 million.
Oh, really? More than her?
Yeah. Well, not for this movie, but I'm saying.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, is she not, like, because she hasn't had like her own film? Okay.
Yeah, and if we're being honest, she's less crucial. She probably has less leveraging power. How much less, I have no idea, but whatever. That's how these things work. So yeah, I don't know the backroom deals and all that kind of stuff. I'm not familiar, but I do know recently, and this is the spicy part. Despite the failure, basically, that this movie was, despite the failure of demonstration of Disney Plus that this movie was, it has further strife. Scarlett Johansson is making a big stink and suing Disney for Black Widow, which is a bad, like that is that it just makes the problem so much worse. The nightmare grows. Disney already started pivoting towards blaming the viewers, essentially, like they usually do for the success of a movie, which never makes any sense.
Oh, like with Star Wars, right?
Right, exactly. They were saying, "Oh, well, it's getting review bombed by some people and blah 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 blah," and like I don't know, something COVID, something else. But it's like you didn't release the movie not to do well. You expected it to do well and it didn't. That's what happened. But we'll be talking about the corporate boardrooms of Disney in a moment. But here's the background, basically. So Scarlett Johansson, when she negotiated her contract for this particular movie, it was negotiated separately, which I think for a lot of these films, they're negotiated in bulk, because a lot of actors negotiate in bulk, even outside of franchises. You'd be surprised. So like, for example, like, name like Brad Pitt, let's say, maybe a bad example, or Al Pacino is probably actually a good example. I'm pretty sure he's negotiated bundles of his acting to different studios. So he'll sign a deal where you'll get a certain amount of money for like a 3-picture deal. So one of which he knows about, and maybe there's a deadline. So like by 2030, he needs to get all these pictures filmed with Universal Studios. Let's say he knows he has one pitch to him that he's down for, but he wants, I don't know, something or another, more money up front, or maybe a slice of the pie, whatever he wants. He wants negotiating power. So he says, you know what, I'm going to promise you 2 more roles, regardless of whether they're part of the same franchise or not, in the Universal system. So in Marvel, that's even more prevalent, obviously, because you have, New York. In the Marvel system, of course, you have more prevalence of that because you're doing a lot of films. So like, Robert Downey Jr., who's basically Tony Stark at this point. Robert Downey Jr. Will negotiate, the next however many Iron Man movies, because it's actually, and he probably actually knows the direction, especially as things, the ball starts rolling. He's basically probably taking a producer-like function in a lot of ways, and he has a lot of say in the direction of his character and all that kind of stuff. And so he's probably negotiated his picture deal, somewhat. So basically, the weird part is that this was a 1-picture deal, which I thought was interesting because that might signal that this movie was actually coerced by the fans. Like, this movie might not have happened if not for the fans. Who were asking for it, and the bad media they were getting about female heroes, but then they won't give Scarlett Johansson, who's been literally around since the beginning, a role. It doesn't make any sense, right? And it really isn't defensible, I don't think. I mean, it doesn't really make sense if you're going down that line of reasoning. And so I think this movie actually might have been forced, which gave Scarlett Johansson an interesting opportunity to leverage a really good deal out of it, because their hands were kind of forced with this movie. They were going to make it, and the terms weren't set beforehand, and so she came to the table saying, I can change the terms now, which is nothing wrong with that, by the way. I think she actually negotiated a pretty good deal. Probably, there's probably people doing it on her behalf and all that kind of stuff, but good for her. You need more of that, sort of aggressiveness with these studios. And so she ends up signing onto a deal where she makes a lot of the share of the profits from theatrical release, which, if you guys don't know, people are talking streaming, but theatrical releases make a lot of money for these studios. A lot of money. It's because of margin. Like, it's ridiculous how much money you make off of movie theaters. That's why they cordon off the film for like however many weeks beforehand, just for movie theaters. Then they move it to streaming. They're trying to move to streaming because they want to get 100% of the profits now. They want to cut out the movie theaters because they're greedy. Which is, it's also their right. It's their product, that part doesn't bother me. But, the narrative that things are so much better on streaming, especially in this case, clearly, obviously false because they didn't really make that much money off of streaming. They didn't make as much as they needed to make off of streaming to make it worthwhile. So she essentially does a copy of prior deals in some ways in terms of her box office split. Except this time she's the main character, so she negotiates a pretty big box office split. And she negotiates down her like guaranteed salary so that she can get more share of the box office split. You know, makes sense if she's confident that her movie will do well. It also makes it that so that she has skin in the game, so that, you know, she's going to do a good job, right? So it makes sense. So she has her own company called Periwinkle Entertainment. When these actors have their own companies, they're basically shell companies that, for tax and legal purposes, they do the exchanging of contracts and whatever. You should be doing that too, by the way, indie filmmakers. You should have shell companies and whatever, but that's a whole other story. So what ends up happening is the contract that she signs basically says that she's guaranteed a wide release for a certain period of time. I think it's 90 days, or no, it's not 90 days. I think it was less than that. I forget what it was. But there's a certain period of time where she's guaranteed a wide release. That's the term. The literal language in the contract is a wide release of the film, of Black Widow, and she gets a lot of the revenue from that. The problem is that Disney pulls a surprise, and they say, oh, we're going to release this on Disney Plus for our early access program, which probably didn't even exist when she signed this contract. Which, you know, you could argue that they didn't preclude in the contract. They didn't preclude that possibility. That's where I think this is going to have to be hashed out in terms of the contract language. I don't think this is actually very cut and dry per se, and we'll see how it plays out. But the problem is that with every deal she's done with Marvel beforehand, it always meant a specific thing. Here's a great example that some lawyers explained this concept. I can link to them later in the post thing. But basically, if you have a deal with a baker, a contract with a baker that you're going to be delivered a dozen donuts every week, you know, and that means 13, right? 13 donuts. That word dozen means 13 to the baker, and that's been the case in the past with every successive iteration of the contract. If all of a sudden the baker gives you 12 donuts this time, and you say foul play, but the baker says, well, haha, that's technically still a dozen, you know, by the meaning of the word dozen, the more common meaning of the word dozen, that's not actually going to fly in the courts, because the common understanding that you had between you and the person you have a contract with was that dozen means 13. So she has that similar argument that she's making in her lawsuit, which is that, and every time she's done this deal beforehand with Marvel, it had been that wide theatrical release meant that she has her own dedicated cordoned off release time where none of the revenue can get siphoned off to Disney Plus, where she doesn't really, I don't know if she makes any money off of the Disney Plus sales. So, yes. Does Disney know that she's expecting this? Obviously. You know, I mean, if we're talking about like morally speaking, I think they know what they were doing. You know, legally speaking is a different question, but in terms of what they knew they were doing, I think they knew that they were screwing her. They just didn't care. So just for the technical term, she's suing for the inducement to breach of contract. And the reason why it's inducement to breach of contract is because she's alleging that Disney is forcing Marvel's hand in terms of how it gets released, because Disney and Marvel aren't, you know, Disney owns Marvel, but Marvel's technically still a separate entity from Disney. So she's suing Disney for forcing Marvel to release the film in certain ways. Steph says in the chat, apparently Robert Downey Jr. made $50 million from the last Avengers, $50 million from Iron Man, $75 million from Endgame, $10 to $15 million for the 10 minutes he appeared in Spider-Man: Homecoming. So yeah,
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So she definitely disproportionately, you know, I mean, she was never going to make as much as Robert Downey Jr., but less than half is like, it's kind of insulting. especially because she's an original cast member, right? So yes. So what does Disney do in response to this lawsuit? Of course, they're going to be really petty. Really petty. And like I said, I'm not taking sides on the legal aspect. I actually don't know, how it's going to turn out. I'm not sure who's in the legal right here. I think there's arguments to be had on both sides. Disney has not filed their response yet. So in fairness, I'm not going to, comment on the merits of their case. I've only read her side basically, right? So Disney, well, regardless of that, Disney comes back really petty, really, really petty, and they accuse her of being greedy, and they disclose how much money she's made so far, which was, not disclosed prior. They say, look, you've made $20 million. Why are you complaining? You're being greedy. You just want to, destroy us, basically, which doesn't make any sense. Do not be fooled here. $20 million in comparison, what they're trying to do is they're make her try to seem like she's, a millionaire complaining about other millionaires, right? That's the vibe that they want to get around this conversation. That has nothing to do with it. People are entitled to the compensation that they negotiated. That's just the fact of it. Regardless if they're millionaires or not. It's just fairness is fair. So that's silly. Then they further this insult to Scarlett Johansson, which, by the way, is not going to be playing well with her cult following at all. None of this is going to go well for Disney.
Well, luckily, Black Widow's dead.
Right. Yeah. That's true. I wouldn't even be surprised if a lot of them, they really didn't care about the franchise at all anyway. So they're really just not going to watch any Marvel movies in the future because of this, because they didn't really care, So, so Disney, they're like, how can we make ourselves look even worse ourselves and project our greed onto Scarlett Johansson? We're going to say she's not sympathetic enough over the COVID stuff. And I'm sitting there, that makes no sense at all. That doesn't even remotely make sense. You chose when you released this film, right? You could have delayed it further if you wanted more people to see it in the theaters. But they're like, you don't understand, Scarlett Johansson. You didn't make as much money as you wanted to make because, COVID and people are not going out and all that kind of stuff. And then they also say we had to release it on streaming because people weren't going to see it in theaters because of COVID and we were supporting our viewers. All of this is BS. If you believe any of this, I have a bridge to sell you. This is ridiculous. This is not
Disney supporting the public.
Yeah, this is not true at all. And so yeah, that's really the whole situation in a nutshell. I think Scarlett Johansson has the upper hand in terms of the court of public opinion. I don't think this is going to play well. I don't know why they didn't just settle immediately. Just give her another $20 million. $30 million if you have to. Just shill it out and shut her up and shut up yourself, why the heck do you have to go ahead and make, a butt out of yourself, essentially, Disney. Bad PR. Whoever managed this, really bad PR. It's not going to play out well. Now, in terms of the articles about this, I don't know how... Let's say that Disney pays people, certain people get paid and they don't disclose that they get paid by Disney to write some cover for Disney in certain high profile things, or at least write articles that make it seem more even playing field than it actually is, right? So yeah, you shouldn't sympathize with a multi-billion-dollar corporate boardroom more than you do with, an actor who's, admittedly part of the Hollywood system and very wealthy. She's still she's not at an advantage on the money front at all. She herself is not a monopoly. She's not a one-person monopoly, whereas Disney is literally a monopoly. So she's at the disadvantage from the money side. But I think in the court of public opinion, I think she's actually got the upper hand here. What Disney doesn't understand is, new economy principles. People can smell, the BS, and they're not going to react well to it, and this is not going to go well. But this whole thing connects to a larger topic, I think, about how Disney affects this whole space in general. So let's take the Disney Plus thing for a second. This didn't work out for them. Wrong bet. Nothing went right. Well, it wasn't a demonstration to stakeholders of Disney Plus, right? It wasn't a demonstration to Wall Street about what Disney Plus could be. It wasn't a demonstration that, movies are back or anything like that. Whatever. It didn't work. And what the thing is, I think people need to understand is that it doesn't matter if you're a monopoly. None of this matters if you're a monopoly, or at least what I would call a monopoly. So this is what I'm going to coin this term, the atrophy cycle. So this is what it's going to end up happening. Disney Plus is the best streaming platform by now. By now, I think, pretty much by all standards. Like, I mean, I'm even talking about from like a quality standard too, because the other streaming platforms have kind of, they've ceded this ground to Disney, with The Mandalorian and Loki and a whole bunch of other things. I haven't seen anything to these things, by the way. I'm just from feel, I can feel that.
Even like in terms of like technical quality, like image quality, I find is much higher on Disney Plus than Netflix.
Yeah, and I believe you. And this is really a fault of Netflix. Netflix is the only other entity that could compete with this. Netflix fell slack. They went to algorithmic content creation. They stopped being a tech company, and that was the whole pitch of Netflix, was that they had like a revolution in the company, and like they brought in a bunch of tech people. Guys, that tech was art focused. That's like I love that. That's like kind of like my bread and butter there. Like, the tech was art focused. It was about compression algorithms. And at the time when Netflix came out, it was the most glorious thing you could find on the internet, because you couldn't stream anything that looked as good. By today's standards, it doesn't look very good, but back when it was revolutionary, it was a big deal. And it's still kind of a technical feat in some ways, but they stopped innovating their compression algorithm. They stopped spending money on the tech. They gave up on the art and in total, and just watching, like, why on earth would you make dark movies, like physically dark, like, a lot of it, the scenes are dark. Why would you contract David Fincher to make, what's the show called? Not House of Cards, because he was involved in that as well. It's the other one, Mindhunter, right? Mindhunter, a lot of scenes are dark, which literally just shows off how ugly the compression algorithm is. It just looks terrible. The whole thing, Netflix fell apart. Disney Plus comes along because Disney's like, wait a second, we have so much content, we could just make our own thing and just take 100% of the thing. Natural progression of things. Netflix essentially allowed them to have the time to develop the platform over the years and develop the ideas while they were, selling their movies to Netflix and still making money off of streaming. In the background, they could siphon that money back into Disney Plus. I have no problem with any of this, by the way, on a conceptual level. The thing that really bugs me is that what's going to happen is that Netflix in of itself is not a monopoly. I have problems with the entertainment space as a whole, and I have problems with Netflix, but Netflix in of itself is not a monopoly. Disney is. So the problem that happens here is that even if Netflix wanted to, I don't know, blow back or something like that, throw some punches back, they're not going to win this fight. This is now a war of attrition. There's no other, it's not a war of quality. It's not a war of whatever. Right now, Disney's winning the quality battle, and that's good. That's good for them. But it doesn't have to be that way. And so what will happen is Disney will fight the other streaming platforms until all of the rest of them are on their knees and dead, basically. And then their own platform will atrophy. It's kind of what Netflix went through, actually. The Netflix kind of killed Blockbuster and a whole bunch of other things. Everything else atrophied. And then Netflix took the crown, and then they stopped caring, and then their platform atrophied, until Disney came along, even bigger fish, and they repeated the cycle, right? What will happen? The quality on Disney Plus will go down in, I don't know, let's say, I'm just BSing a number here, 5 to 10 years, right? 5 to 10 years from now, it'll become really crappy budget algorithmic filmmaking. But it won't matter because there's no more competition. They've killed all the competition, essentially. Everyone has to default to Disney Plus to see anything of value, right? And so now they rot the film and TV space away. And then what will happen is that once the film and TV space, once people say, I don't even want to watch movies, I don't even want to watch TV at all anymore because, none of it's good. I can't find anything I want to watch, even though there are 100,000 titles. I don't want to watch any of this. Once that happens, Disney will just exit film and TV. That's all because they're monopoly. They don't die on this hill, right? They just move on. And what they will do is they'll pick up gaming and they'll just hammer at gaming and they'll do the same thing where they crowd out the space. They'll atrophy everyone else out. They'll be the dominant player and then it'll be VR. They'll just keep doing this with mediums because they don't care about the medium. They don't have to. There's nothing that makes them care about the medium, right? They win by killing. They don't win by gaining customers. It's a different kind of game. That's what I would like to call the atrophy cycle, I guess, basically. Netflix is doing this now. Instead of improving their shows and TVs and regrouping on that front, they're moving to gaming. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's obvious. That obviously was going to happen because you don't care, Anyway, so that's the whole thing. Now, the last thing I have to say overall is I have no idea how Disney has a reputation anymore. I don't get it. I truly don't get it. This is something that gets me mad, like actually mad. They've done so much to show that they are an unfeeling, disgusting corporation. So on top of this thing with Scarlett Johansson and being petty as hell with it, and trying to run her over, despite their whole, female empowerment and blah, blah, blah. But then they just cannibalize her because she spoke up, which is like the exact opposite. It's disgusting. And not only did they do that, but you have the whole thing with the Uyghurs and Mulan, which I just cannot forgive them for. That's disgusting. Then you have the whole Captain Marvel thing. Again, taking advantage of a whole group of people, flipping them over and saying, yeah, we don't care about you anyway. And now they're going to do it again with Captain Marvel 2. If you believe that Captain Marvel 2 has a chance of giving you satisfaction, I've got a bridge to sell you. It's not going to be good. They're doing it again. Then you have... Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, how about John Boyega and, diminishing his not only like physical, stature on the advertising, but presumably also his role in the film out of deference to Chinese markets. And we can't have a black male being a lead character and prominent character in Star Wars.
That was the next thing on my list that I was going to mention. You're telling me that you still believe Disney cares about representation if they're going to literally make a black man smaller on a poster to appeal to a Chinese market. The same Chinese market that they give money to, despite the fact that they have slave labor and people dying in China. It's disgusting. I don't know what to tell people anymore. How can you possibly expect them to be genuine at all? And the last thing, I think people somewhat forgot about this. Similar to the Finn thing, T'Challa from Black Panther on the Chinese poster, he was masked up on every other poster. He was, he had his face and whatever, and in same pose, same poster, except on the Chinese poster, they put his Black Panther mask on, so you couldn't tell what race he was. How can you say you care? I just don't get it. Stop. I don't know what to tell people anymore. How can I? And the crazy thing is, I see people retweet Disney saying woke things. They're not woke people. They're a corporate boardroom that is taking advantage of you because you care. That's what's happening. I don't know what else to tell people. It's just like, I don't know how naive, and I can't take it anymore. It like really bugs me.
The slogans are so bad too. Like, you know, what Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm, you know, saying, "Oh, the Force is female." Like, we need, you know, like, come on, or like the kind of infamous picture of well, they're planning the Star Wars High Republic of the boardroom. You know, the board they're writing on says like, I don't remember exactly what it said, but something like, you know, important things to focus on, and it's like LGBTQ and like diversity, you know, these are core tenets of Star Wars. Like, no, not like the story of Star Wars, you know. It was, we gotta push our messages in, like, but are we actually going to represent those values? Of course not, but we're going to put on the show that we're representing them so we can get your money.
Oh, it makes my blood. These people make my blood boil. It's so disgusting. It's so disgusting. I don't know. I don't know what to tell people. And I feel like people actually, there's a certain segment of the United States population that actually does fall for it every time, and they use it as a weapon against people they don't like. They say, you don't like this movie because you don't like XYZ. You are supporting a company that supports a country that literally puts people through slave labor. A minority group in a country is being used for slave labor. What other thing do you need? It doesn't matter what they say. There's no excuse for that. You know, I don't even know what to say. And then they like literally backhand smack you with like movies like Captain Marvel. It's like, I don't know what to say anymore. Like, I don't know how you believe this stuff every time anymore. And it's not like people don't know this. You know, the thing, the John Boyega thing was a big deal when it came out. Then people just forgot it all of a sudden. What are you, like, what? You know, am I the only one with a memory as to what happened before? Like, because it's painful, you know, it's actually painful. So it's like, just bizarre, man, bizarre. I had one last thing to say. What was it? It was something about, oh man, I forget what it was. It was something else they had done. I forget. But you know, it's all about power and money. That's what it's about. You know, what gives them power, what gives them money. If they can bludgeon people that they dislike, if they can make more money, essentially stealing it from the fans, you know, if they can just atrophy their enemies to death, you know, if they can keep lobbying their way out of not, it's not even lobbying. I mean, sometimes it's straight bribing. You'd be surprised what is, you know, easily find outable about what Disney does to avoid, you know, trust busting. You know, I mean, guys,
or anything, copyright. Yeah. Let's, you know, every time Mickey Mouse is going to enter the public domain, they spend enough money to increase the length of that something has to, you know, before it can enter the public domain. Just
for reasons.
Mouse.
For reasons that they just have to have it, apparently, and all this kind of stuff. It's just like, oh my gosh, like, just thinking about it just makes me so mad. Like, how did they, you really think that the 20th Century Fox deal made any sense on paper in terms of its anti-monopoly, you know, investigation? You think that investigation happened properly? Seriously? You merged some of the biggest entities in the country, period. Like, and at the same time, the deal that got more scrutiny, I remember at the time there's some other deal happening that got more scrutiny. It was like something like two smaller companies. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, you know, it's bizarre. It's strange. I'm going to work myself up too much. I don't know. I just want to say for people who like what to do about it, is please the biggest thing you can do is allow people to voice their frustrations without being shouted down. If you're going to it's just the first thing you need to do is literally just ignore Disney and what they say. They are lying 90% of the time. You know, they're lying 90% of the time. So just ignore what they're saying. If you're going to be tribal enough where you're going to literally just repeat them, you are doing the worst out of everyone. You know, you're doing the worst out of everyone. Allow people to voice their frustrations openly. Encourage people to, you know, want to talk about films again. There's such a crush and dialogue over films in general now. It's so sad, you know? Only the really old critics, you know, that I follow, or not old like in age, but, you know, been around for a while, still do the same thing they used to do and write their critiques in the same way, and, you know, or if it's a YouTube channel, whatever. You know, but like in terms of the fans, they don't talk in the same way anymore. And it's going to be the death of it. It's not going to be just cinema. I think some people are like, well, movies can die as long as we have our streaming and TV shows. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the atrophy cycle over and over and over again. You know? So just let's be honest with each other, please, you know, about how you feel about things, and say it out loud and encourage other people to say what they're thinking, please. You know, despite how big they are, they still have fears about certain things. They fear, you know, people complaining so much that the legislature will actually do something. You know, they fear, you know, that people will, like, you know, a large portion of the country will actually boycott them, you know, to death, you know. So please, just, yeah, take it seriously too, because I think it's a much more serious issue than people realize what's going on there. Heavy topic, but that's my segment. Yeah. Also, I don't know anything about Scarlett Johansson. I don't even know if she's a good person or not. I don't really care. You know, so if you want to tweet her any part of this rant or anything like that, just snip it, send it to Scarlett Johansson, and I don't know. You never know, right? Like a lot of times. You know, the smallest gestures towards, you know, what's good can help the most. So you tweet at her too. Tweet it, say, hey, you shouldn't be bullied for wanting your slice of the pie that you think that you're owed, and you should have your day in court fairly with a judge that is not bribed. You know, like, with, like, you know, like you deserve your fair day in court. You know. And just say that loudly and boldly. You know, there's not, Disney can make you feel however they want, but if you just keep speaking, you know, I think that'll be helpful. Yeah.
Ignore, just don't follow Disney's logic, and that anybody who like doesn't like something that they do, you know, especially like something that has a woke element to it, you know, Disney likes to criticize them as toxic fans, so I would ignore that. Don't fall into that trap. You can, like, you know, you can not like one of these films. You can not like, you know, what Disney did with the recent Star Wars trilogy, and you're not liking it because you hate women having important roles in films, right? That's the false equivalence Disney is trying to create. And yeah, don't buy that. There are like legitimate reasons why you could not like those films, and it's not because you hate women having important roles in a film.
In fact, here I am saying I wish Scarlett Johansson got her shot. I really do. You know, like, it just makes me upset. You know, like, she deserves her shot. She's a woman who tried to negotiate a really good deal. This is something that, you know, women who want to be in the professional world, this is a good example for them, you know, and they're just crapping all over it. Like, and don't accept it. Don't accept it. You know, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, yeah. So I don't know if you agree with anything that we say here, just hit the like button, post a comment or whatever. If you have more to say about all this stuff, we're in the Discord. We're talking a little bit more and more. We want to have constant conversations, not just once a week. So, in the link in the description, there's a link to our Discord. I think it's going to get popping in there, so you don't want to miss it. We're going to talk more about news and stuff.
There's been a little bit more activity going on there, so
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. And enjoy the week. Watch good movies. Pop on it. Maybe consider buying a Blu-ray instead of streaming something. Not for the sake of anything, but sticking it to the companies. I know that's not feasible for a lot of people, but think about it. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.